So, okay, let's get going. So some of you will know this already. You could probably recite it back to me, so feel free to tune out. But I'm just going to give you kind of the basics. So I am Gigi. I am the Amazon Interview Whiz, and I suspect most of you found me through my YouTube channel. So you will know that I interviewed and bar raised for Amazon for around 5 years, and I've hired hundreds of Amazonians, tech, non-tech, dozens of job families, dozens of different countries. Super lucky to bar raise across multiple countries as well. Obviously I run my YouTube channel, but I also run my own Amazon Interview Preparation Academy, where I offer a slightly different way to get preparation coaching for your interview. I built an e-learning program where you can pretty much find out everything you need to know to ace your Amazon interview at about a tenth of the price it would cost you to learn exactly the same thing from a one-to-one interview coach. My mission, as many of you I know will know, is to make Amazon interview expertise available for all. Okay, so housekeeping on this session. What I'll do is, as you guys type questions in the comments box, I'll scroll through them. I will try and pick questions that I think are as broadly useful for everyone as possible. I want to make sure that everybody's time is well used here. So try to avoid asking me very specific questions about specific roles, because chances are, unless I think it's got some broader application, I will probably have to skip it. Second thing is, I won't cover specific technical questions. Primarily because there's about 250 different job families across the whole of Amazon, and no one person could be a technical expert in all of those. My expertise was as a bar raiser, and as a bar raiser, your expertise is really, really knowing the leadership principles, understanding them in depth, and being able to see them in any context, in any kind of skill set described situation, and be able to pull out and tease out what those behaviors are that lead to the leadership principles. So that's my area of expertise, kind of interview strategy, technique, and the leadership principles and the whole process itself. I can't give you expert advice on what coding you might end up having to face if you're interviewing for an SDE2, for example. Okay, and then the last thing is, people do tend to just message me, I'm interviewing for this type of role, any tips? I can't respond to that type of a question here and now. My YouTube channel is there, 2.5 hours of content that is applicable to pretty much every single job. So if you just want a general sense of what things should I do and what should I not do, definitely dig into the YouTube channel, because it's all there, I promise you. Okay, so with no further ado, why don't we go and have a look at the comments? I will pick some out, and as people arrive, I will also say hello and welcome, because obviously that's a nice thing to do. So, oh, we've had problems with my audio quality, have we, Lo? Okay, you can talk to me about that separately. Audio is a particular nightmare of mine because of the nature of the office that I have. Yeah, quality of audio is a killer, but thank you for the compliment. I have been trying. All right, so let's see what we've got. Oh, Wasim, okay, yes, you are back. Okay, I'm going to pin your question, Wasim. I think I responded, I think you asked me more or less the same question on YouTube, and I responded to you maybe only a couple of hours ago, so you might not have got the answer. So I'll share the answer with you now, and then everyone can get the benefit of as well. So you have an L5 area manager interview, which is a very common level and role. They really hire at high volume. You've got 4 interviewers. How many LPs will you get asked per interviewer? Screening manager gave you 2, and hiring manager gave you 2 as well. Yeah, that's exactly what I would expect, Wasim. So what happens is each interviewer is assigned 2 leadership principles. They should be aiming to ask you 1 question per leadership principle. Now, they might end up asking you 2 questions for 1 leadership principle and 1 question for another. There may be enough time to ask you 2 questions on each leadership principle. You may have such a deep and complex example that they end up only asking you one question for one leadership principle. So there's no hard and fast rule exactly. And the number of questions that you're going to get asked will invariably be different depending on the complexity of the answer that you give. The more complex your answer, the more time it takes to talk about, and therefore the less time there is to ask you more than questions. Every interviewer is given 2 leadership principles to cover off, because what they need to do at the debrief is have a really good map of all of the key leadership principles and a calibration of where you fit in terms of from concern all the way up to strength. It's a 5-point scale for each of those leadership principles. So if they only ask you one question or 2 questions in interview, they're then reducing down the opportunity that they have to gather as much data as they can to tick off these different leadership principles. So you should expect each interviewer to have been assigned 2 leadership principles. They will not be the same leadership principles. Every interviewer is given their own unique leadership principle. Warning, some behavioral questions within different leadership principles can sound a little bit the same. So you may find yourself with one interviewer asking you a question and another interviewer asking you a very, very similar question. I promise you they're not after the same leadership principles. It's because some of the questions do sound very similar. So it's up to you at that point if you want to then flag to your second interviewer just to say, I think I had a very similar question to this with Billy earlier. Do you still want me to answer it? If they say yes, then go ahead. Okay, I hope that was helpful for you, Wasim. I'm sorry it took me a little while to get the answer back to you on YouTube. Okay, let's move on. Sniffing is not nice, Lo. It's not nice. It's vulgar, as my school teachers used to tell me. So yes, I will try not to sniff, but I'm going to apologize if I do. It's actually really cold where I live. Yesterday, it was glorious sunshine and I was out doing my gardening. This morning, it was actually snowing. I think we went from something like 16 degrees centigrade down to 1 overnight. So that's caused me some issues. So I do apologize. It's vile. Okay, so where have we got to? Oh, I've just lost track. Hang on, there you are again. Okay. Still. F-K. Is that the way I should pronounce that? It's really hard to know, but welcome. This is your first time. Definitely, I would remember that name. So welcome. Thank you for joining. It's really great to have new people arrive. It's good to have the people who I know and I'm familiar with, because that just makes me happy that I have friends that come along. But thank you for joining. So welcome. Parvi, okay. Oh, good luck. Oh my goodness, you've got panel interview in 2 hours. Oh, I'm so privileged that you came along here ahead of that. So thank you. Good luck. I'm sure everyone here on the chat is wishing you good luck. Okay. Moving on then. Okay. I'm just quickly reading a question here, so bear with me 1 second. All right. F-K. I'm going to pin your question up because it's a bit of a broad question, but I'm going to narrow it down because actually it's kind of along the lines of something that quite a lot of people have been coming to me with recently. So you're saying that you've made it through assessment center. Very good. How can you prep for your 2 30-minute interviews with different hiring teams? Okay. 2 30 minutes. So are you on, is this a grad program that you're on, FK? But you'll tell me that in a minute. I will give everybody the broader sense of what I was trying to get at. If you've seen my YouTube, you know there is a massive amount of content on there. And quite a lot of people are now coming to me and saying, where do I start? Like, there is so much here. It's a little bit overwhelming. So this is for you, FK, and this is for everybody else who's feeling overwhelmed. The first thing, the most important thing is the leadership principles, okay? You are not getting hired at Amazon unless you really demonstrate that you are bar raising on the behaviors that are connected to the leadership principles. So you have to really understand those leadership principles, understand the behaviors that are associated with it, and then go back into your career history and find the very best, most outstanding examples you can find that demonstrate the behaviors that link to the leadership principles. If you did nothing else in your preparation, and I would hope you would, but if you did nothing else in your preparation, you have to nail the leadership principles. Everything else that you see on my channel is, without diminishing it, the cherry on the icing, okay? It's tips and it's tricks and it's strategies and it's answers to quite complex questions that people have asked me in the past. But the fundamentals of the Amazon interview are, without question, the leadership principles. So if you're tight for time or if you're feeling overwhelmed, I will direct you to absolutely focus on getting some amazing stories associated with those behaviors, associated with the leadership principles. Okay, so you need to have a look at the definition of the leadership principles and completely deconstruct it. All of the leadership principles have between 2 and 4 different facets, as I like to call it. So the behaviors can be bucketed into between 2 and 4 facets. And if you want to know what I mean by that, go to the Amazon Interviewers Academy, and I will put the link in at the end of the session, and you'll be able to get my Customer Obsession Leadership Principle Masterclass completely free. I promise I will not be chasing you to buy more product. Go and get that, and you'll see what I mean by the different facets associated with each leadership principle. If you can work out what those facets are, obviously my masterclasses will tell you, but if you don't want to buy my masterclasses, that's fine. If you can then break down the description of each of the 14 leadership principles, identify the facets, and then have those stories aligned to the facets, you are going to be 80% there in terms of having what you need for the interview. Everything else in my YouTube channel is that extra 20% of tweaks, tricks, polishing, nuances, sparkles, cherry, the lot. Okay, so I hope that was kind of helpful for you, F-K, and that gave you something. Okay, so let's see what else we've got here. Okay, I've just unpinned you. Ooh, unpinned you, F.K. Okay. Okay. Right, Parvi, let me talk about this because this is important. So Parvi is saying that her recruiter mentioned her. I've assumed you're a her, actually. I don't know, so I apologize for that. That was very presumptuous. Parvi recruiter mentioned only 4 leadership principles. So customer obsession, earn trust, dive deep, and deliver results. Does that mean all 6 interviewers will be asking questions only related to these 4? No, absolutely not. What your recruiter has told you, and you are super lucky that you got to hear this information because not everybody does, so make use of it. They have told you the critical leadership principles for the role. When you're interviewed at Amazon, they are looking for evidence across all of the leadership principles. And when they hire, particularly the responsibility of the bar raiser, aka me when I was there, is to look at all of the evidence gathered across all 14 leadership principles and conclude, is this person raising the bar, raising the standard overall for Amazon? Are they going to be a great long-term hire for Amazon? But within each role, there are usually 4 to 5 really critical leadership principles. And they're critical because they're the most important leadership principles to be able to do that particular role well. So if you're lucky, and Parvi, it sounds like you have got lucky, your recruiter is going to share with you what those critical leadership principles are. And you absolutely need to make sure you bring your A game to the examples for those leadership principles. But your panel will be asking you questions on other leadership principles because you have to raise the bar overall on all 14 leadership principles. Now, exactly how many leadership principles will get covered by your panel will depend on how many interviewers you have. Each interviewer should be assigned 2 unique leadership principles. So definitely, Pavi, focus on customer obsession, earns trust, dive deep, and deliver results. And you should definitely, if you haven't already, pick up my Amazon Interview Wiz Academy Customer Obsession Masterclass because you've got that LP. But you also need to make sure that you have examples for the rest of the leadership principles, the other 10 that you can talk to. Then, by all means, make those 4 absolutely mind-bogglingly brilliant, but you still have to come strong for the other 10 because your bar raiser is going to be thinking, fine, this person can do this job, but I need to make sure that my responsibility to Amazon is to hire someone who raises the bar overall and has long-term Amazon career growth potential. Okay, I hope that was helpful for you. I'm going to unpin you now. Okay, Craig Orlando from NJ. So I'm going for New Jersey. Hope I've got that right. Okay, so you just want to know what to expect on your panel compared to your phone interview. You said you got an call back in half an hour that you were moving through, so that sounds awesome. So what to expect at panel? This is quite useful information generally for people. So I'm assuming you are going to be doing, cool, I got it right, New Jersey. I'm assuming you're going to be doing it over video rather than in person. So really, it's going to be very much the same as your initial phone interviews, where you're going to have the number varies of how many panelists you get. It kind of depending on the seniority of the role. Pretty junior roles, you can probably expect 4 interviewers. Senior roles, I've bar raised on roles that have had as many as 7 interviewers plus me, which was that's a massive panel. I was a bit concerned at the time that it was a bit too big, if only for me and having to manage all of those people at debrief. But you can expect between, I would say on average, 4 to 5 different interviewers. And the interview you'll have will be so similar to the phone interview you had, where they will literally have their leadership principle questions. They'll ask you those questions and you need to give them really good, rich detail about the behaviors that you're talking about in your examples. Slight difference between your early interviews and your later interviews is there's probably less emphasis on some of those introductory questions. So you might well have had questions around, why do you want this job? Why do you want to come to Amazon? Tell me about yourself. Those kind of standard introductory questions. Those questions tend to matter in early rounds because the hiring manager wants to be convinced that you really want the job and that you're going to stick around. But they've been convinced about them by the time you get to the final rounds. And really, anyone that asks you those questions there, it's more polite warm-up type questions. The answer to that should never be used as evidence to hire you or not hire you when it comes to final round. You'll have a mix of people at the actual panel itself. You'll have the hiring manager should definitely be there. You'll have direct colleagues from kind of probably your peer group from who also work for your hiring manager. You'll probably have people joining from adjacent teams who you work with regularly and of course would have a skin in the game to make sure that you're a great hire because they're going to have to work with you. And then you will have the bar raiser who will not be from the team. They'll be from a completely different part of the business. And they're that kind of third party objective person who's there to make sure that a good long-term decision is made. Okay, so that's kind of the overview of what to expect. So broadly speaking, more of the same. That is the good thing about the Amazon interview process. I think there's many good things about the Amazon interview process. I admire it hugely, but I particularly like the fact that it's very clear. There's no change in the process. If you prepare well for round 1, you will already be well prepared for the final round. And I think there's great comfort in that consistency that you don't have to tweak or swing or change strategies. Okay, let's see what else we have then. Scrolling. Just going to pause and read a question here. Okay, Jocelyn. Welcome, Jocelyn. I think I recognize your name, so you may well have been here before, and you're joining from Australia. Are you joking? It's like 3 o'clock in the morning. What are you doing awake at 3 o'clock in the morning? Okay. Well done, Jocelyn. That is commitment. I'm so impressed. Okay, let's answer your question for you, seeing as you decided to get up at the crack of dawn. So you are asking me if you should answer briefly and use insight to show experience, or wait until the interviewer asks more questions. Such a good question, Jocelyn. Thank you for asking. So here's my view on this. You will hear some advice that tells you you need to keep your star examples brief. Now, sometimes you'll hear 1 to 2 minutes, sometimes you'll hear 3 to 4 minutes. My position on this is you have to take ownership of making sure that the behaviors that illustrate how fantastic you are and align to the leadership principles are articulated in the interview. If you're relying on the interviewer to ask you the right follow-up question in order for you to be able to explain those behaviors, you might be very disappointed because they may not ask you the right question. So my advice to all candidates is you need to speak concisely, specifically, and do not repeat yourself. But if it takes 7 or 8 minutes for you to walk through your star example, as long as those 7 or 8 minutes are jam-packed full of specific, concise, and non-repeated evidence about the behaviors that you demonstrated, that is what you want to do. The evidence is in the detail. I actually interviewed a TPM, technical product manager, yesterday for a series that I'm hoping to launch on my YouTube channel, interviewing different people from different skill sets at Amazon. And literally, these were his words to me without being prompted. And he was very much saying the detail is incredibly important. So, Jocelyn, don't rely on your interviewer to ask you the right question. If you have evidence of a behavior that is aligned to the question that they ask you, then you get it out there on the table. Because why would you not? Why would you choose to just ignore powerful evidence for the sake of meeting some somewhat arbitrary time-banded period that some recruiter or ex-hiring manager or career coach has come up with? Right? It's all about the evidence. If you have the evidence, take it to court, make it your witness. Okay, I hope that answered your question, Jocelyn. Thank you for joining. I'm actually quite flattered that someone would get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and join my live. Okay, although I hope you are actually in Australia and you're not just Australian and in the UK, but it says interviewing at AWS, so I'm going for you're in Oz right now. Okay. Okay, Lo, this is a great question. Thank you. Loving this question. So, do the interviewers need to see every strength on every question that they ask in order to give you an okay? So do you need to ace every strength for every question? No, you do not. And I think maybe in the many hundreds of interviews that I did, I really think I can only recall a handful where I looked at the grid. And actually, if you want to know what I'm talking about, I posted on LinkedIn a infographic a few weeks ago that actually gives you a little bit of a representation of the grid that Amazonians look at when they're making the decision to hire you or not hire you. So when I keep saying the grid, go back into my LinkedIn feed and find that post. I might put it in my featured actually, because I think it's quite useful. What they'll be doing is they'll be looking at this overall grid, and it's literally color coded from deep red for concern up to bright green for strength. And I have very, very rarely seen a 14 leadership principle grid that has been all green. What you have to be aiming for is strong greens in the key leadership principles that we were talking about when we spoke about Parvi earlier. You really do need to be showing strength in those key leadership principles. Either some strength, ideally strength. It's a scale that goes concern, some concern, mixed, some strength, strength. You really want to be in the strength space when it comes to the key leadership principles. For everything else, you need to be edging up to the mixed and the some strength. You can still get hired if you have a couple of some concerns and mixed in your overall grid, because no one's good at everything. And that was my point about I've very rarely seen a completely green grid. Like, everyone's got strengths and spaces where they're not so strong. So you don't have to have this beautiful, completely green grid. A grid that generally gets hired would be a strong, big bright greens on the key leadership principles, smatterings of some strengths in some of the other leadership principles, maybe 2 or 3 mixed on the other leadership principles, and you'll probably get away with 1, 2, maybe 3 some concerns. When you start getting into the really red space of concerns, that's when it starts to get a little bit of a concern. Certainly, if any of those concerns land on something like earns trust, it's not happening. You could have a really strong green grid, and the minute a bar raiser sees a red in earns trust, flags start flying. So do be careful on the earns trust space. So no, you don't have to be green in everything. You need strong greens in the key leadership principles. I'd expect a combination of a splatterings of some strengths and mixed, probably get away with a couple, 2 or 3, some concern. I'd be aiming definitely to avoid concern, because nobody's amazing at everything. And once you get into Amazon, you'll grow, you'll learn so much. And again, that's what the bar raiser is looking for. You have to be raising the bar overall, definitely strong on the key leadership principles, but they are looking for long-term hires. So a lot of conversation in debrief also talks about coachability. You'll find, or you won't find because you won't be there, but I can tell you a lot of conversation at debrief is about, how do we feel about mixed on this? That feels like something that's an important thing in Amazon. Dive deep, for an example. Do we feel that this candidate is coachable? Can we probably get ourselves comfortable that once they're in Amazon and they start thinking in a new and different way because their old company wasn't particularly focused on data, that we could be confident that they could meet our bar on Dive Deep? Tick yes. Okay, we'll live with mixed on Dive Deep. It's quite a complex dialogue that goes on in debrief. Okay, I hope that answers your question, Lo. Just make sure you nail those key leadership principles. If your recruiter isn't as kind as Parvi and not told them to you, literally deconstruct your job description. It's always in the job description, I promise you. If you understand the leadership principles well enough, you will see them shining through in the job description. My Amazon Interview Wiz interview preparation masterclass has a really good section on how to do that if you signed up to the program. Okay. I'm going to unpin you, Lo. Thank you very much for that question. I'm going to move us on. Move on. Shripad, welcome. Welcome to the session. Thank you very much for joining. Just going to quickly cover your question because I covered it a few seconds ago. You're asking what you should expect from your next round. You've already been through one round. More of the same. Just more of the same. There'll be different questions on different leadership principles, but structurally, it should be very much the same. If you had going for a particularly technical role, you might find that the amount of technical content in the round 2 is slightly less from the amount of technical content in the round 1, but broadly speaking, more of the same. So if you prepped really, really well for round 1, you should be in a good position. Okay, moving on then. Okay. Sláinte, Brian from Ireland. I'm a Gallagher. My husband's Irish, so Sláinte is cheers, welcome, that type of thing for everybody else. Okay, so let's just have a look. Thank you. I hadn't read your message until I said hello before reading your message. So Brian said that he has purchased my leadership masterclasses and he's found them very useful and he highly recommends them. So I do too. I spent about 700 hours between September and February creating them. So I'm delighted you found them useful, Brian, and good luck for you. Okay. Okay, so F-K, you were just asking me how long I recommend you spend answering each question. I think I covered that ground earlier in terms of just make sure you've got the evidence, and really that's what matters the most. So I'm not going to go into too much more detail on that now. Let me keep going. Whitney, welcome. Hello. Let's just have a quick look. Okay. Whitney. So you're saying you've got a panel for AWS sales role later this week. 3 of the 5 members of the panel are in tech roles. Should you be prepared for tech questions from them? No, only if your role is technical. So some sales roles in AWS actually require quite a lot of technical knowledge in order to be able to answer your customers' preliminary questions before passing them over to an SME. If that's the nature of the role that you're going for in AWS, then you could probably expect some technical questions. But there are other roles in AWS that are not technical and don't require you to be able to have a technical conversation with the customer, and you are entirely dependent on an SME to do that for you. So if your role isn't technical, then they should not be asking you technical questions. If they're a technical team, it's possible that they're part of that adjacent team that I talked about a little bit earlier, who will be on the panel because you work closely with them. But just because they're technical, it doesn't mean that they're expecting you to be technical. So just be clear on the level of technical specialty that's required in your type of sales role in AWS. And once you understand that, then you'll be in a good position to know whether you should or shouldn't be worrying too much about the technical nature of the product and the solutions. Okay, thank you for that question, Whitney. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that one before, so I always love it when I get brand new questions. Okay, let's keep going then. Vishesh, hello. Okay. How do you find me on LinkedIn? So I am Gigi, the Amazon interview whiz. So I think if you just search Gigi, the Amazon, but it's Amazon with a 0, not an O. I'm treading a very fine brand line here, which I'm still not sure I've made the right choice on, but that's how you find me, Gigi the Amazon interview whiz, and I'm there on LinkedIn. I also have a company page on LinkedIn. So if you can't find me, you should be able to find the Amazon interview whiz on a company page. Okay. Okay. F-K, that's a good question. We're getting into the details here. Okay, so F-K is asking, what would be a cause for mild or some concern? It broadly breaks down into 2 camps. It's either going to be because you simply haven't provided the evidence and there's a gap in evidence, and the gap in evidence is itself a mild concern. Or the other bucket is the evidence is there and the evidence that you have shared has caused me some mild concern. So I'm going to give you a very specific example here to try and bring that to life. Let's use earns trust. So you might have been describing to me a situation around a time where you had a disagreement with a peer, making this one up, okay? And you've described to me the meetings that you had, the conversations that you had, the words that you used, what you were thinking, how you responded to something they said, etc. And when I look at the behaviors required for earns trust, what you've explained to me is not in line with those behaviors. So maybe what you described to me suggests a brusqueness, or maybe it suggests a lack of empathy. Maybe it suggests a lack of effort to build bridges on your part. Any of those things might be a reason why I would have a mild concern about you when it came to earns trust. So it's either really a lack of evidence or an existence of evidence that is counter to what is considered to be a good behavior in that particular leadership principle. I hope that's clear. Good question. Another new one, actually. No one's asked me that one before either. This is a great day for new questions. Okay. Okay, so let's just keep going. Lots of people with questions. Okay, Lo, we're going to keep going back to Lo because Lo is full of awesome questions today. So I really don't mean to miss anybody out, but these are great questions that you'll all get great benefit from. So let's go with this one. Amazon needs to see data on your answer. It means quantitative, but does it also mean qualitative? So giving them as many details as possible. So when you see people write down this point about Amazon wanting to see data, they are referring to the metrics data. So having numbers to provide the evidence that you have driven change in your business is really important. The reason why Amazon, or quite frankly, any other business is ever going to employ you is because they want you to contribute to their bottom line. Your KPI and your contribution could be very, very high up the funnel. Oh, my jumper's filthy. Sorry. It could be very high up the funnel, but they're expecting that contribution to eventually trickle down to the bottom line. So they need to be convinced that you are going to deliver them ROI. And to be convinced that you are going to deliver them ROI, they want to see that you have moved a metric from one place to another. Doesn't need to be a commercial metric. As I said, you could be pretty high up the funnel. So it doesn't have to be revenue. It doesn't have to be volume, but it needs to be some kind of quantitative value that they can look at and they can say, this person has moved the dial. So it could be about the time something takes to do. You moved it from X minutes to Y minutes. It could be about the accuracy rate. Maybe you improved an accuracy rate. Those types of metrics, but that's what they mean when they're talking about Amazon is a data-driven organization. Now, in some leadership principles, that's quite hard to be able to do. So earns trust is one where people find it quite hard to come up with a metric. How do you measure earns trust other than maybe if you had a horrible relationship with a customer and they spend no money with you and then you built up trust with them and suddenly they spend loads of money with you? That's an example. But there are a couple of leadership principles where it's not so easy to come up with metrics. And that's okay, right? In a couple of leadership principles, a couple of answers, if you don't have hard metrics, it's not going to be the end of the world. But as a bar raiser and an interviewer, you're going to want to see across the gamut of all of the evidence that has been gathered, a high penetration of metrics that help you feel good that this person can move the dial from one place to another place. And if they can do that, chances are that dial movement flows down to the bottom line and you're going to get ROI from that individual. Okay. I hope that covered that off then, Lo. Really good question. Thank you for asking it. Okay. You can ask as many questions as you like, Paddy. Don't apologize. I just might not answer them, but feel free to ask them. There's no shame in asking questions. Okay. So let's see what else we've got. Okay. Pranjali, welcome. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. So this is a good question as well, and it's one that I get asked quite regularly, and it relates to the length of time that it takes to go through the Amazon interview process. So Pranjali is saying you've got your panel a whole month after your phone screen. Is it normal to have such a gap between interviews? So there is no normal, which is really unhelpful for candidates, I know, but there actually is no normal. I'm sure someone can somewhere calculate a mean average, but it's a mean average. It would not be anything that was truly meaningful. And the reason why it can be as little as a couple of days and as much as a month is it's entirely dependent on the people whom they want to bring to the panel, because quite often a hiring manager, I know I certainly did, has specific people that they would really want on the panel. And if that's the case, then finding the appropriate time to bring those people together in a 1 or 2 day window to do your panel for you can take a while, particularly around holiday times. Actually, holiday times are a complete nightmare for organizing interviews, a horrible nightmare for organizing panels, and actually a bit of a nightmare for organizing debriefs as well. So part of why you've been waiting a month could be the fact that we are in that Easter period, kids are off school, etc., etc. It's absolutely got no correlation with your performance in your earlier interviews, nothing at all. It's just the crazy nightmare logistics of trying to organize all of these ridiculously busy Amazonians to be in more or less the same place at more or less the same time. And that's true also, guys, of getting your answers back on the outcome, not so much on early rounds, because that's just a one-on-one between you and an interviewer and they just need to sit at their desk and type it all up and come up with a decision. But anyone that goes to or has just been on panel, you are supposed to hear back within 5 days if you've done your panel, but sometimes it's longer than that. And if it's longer than that, it has absolutely nothing to do with your performance, and it will be everything to do with the nightmare logistics that these poor recruitment coordinators have to manage to bring together all of these people onto one call all at once. So if you're one of those people and it's taking longer than those 5 days, don't panic. It's got nothing to do with you and everything to do with the logistics. Okay. Thank you, Pranjali, for that question. I'm going to move on now. Okay. Let's just read a couple more. Okay, Meresh, I'm going to answer your question for you. I did say I wasn't going to ask some very specific questions, and I wanted to focus on ones that are general for everybody. But sounds like you need this answer quickly, so I will provide it quickly. You want to know whether an answer for bias for action, does it need to be a story specific to a customer, or can it be something you did by yourself? No, it doesn't have to be specific to a customer. It's specific to bias for action. So the question is all about a situation where you either took a risk because you had to weigh up the benefits or the risks against something, or it's an example where you had to do something with a very short time frame and didn't have time to consider all of the evidence. That's the context for it, whether it's with a customer, whether it's not with a customer, whether it's an internal project, whether it's buying a solution from an external supplier and you were coming up with a deadline, whatever. It doesn't matter the broader context. What matters is the bias for action and what bias for action is looking for, which is someone who can make decisions under tight deadlines with not enough information, or people who have to weigh up the risks and the opportunities of moving forward in a situation. Okay, hope that helps. I do have, obviously, a very good bias for action leadership principle masterclass in my academy if you want to dive a little bit deeper into that one. Only $15 plus local taxes. Shameless plug, sorry. Had to get it in somewhere. Okay, right. Let's have a look then what else we have. Okay. Then Katraj I'm going for that one. So I'm going to pin that because it's going to be a super quick answer. So you're asking how long after loop/panel you'll get a response. Amazon's commitment is 5 days, 5 working days to get a yes or a no. I have quite an extensive video about this on YouTube. Sometimes you don't get it within 5 days for the reasons that I just described a minute ago. But broadly speaking, their commitment to you is that they will give you an answer within 5 days of your panel. So start counting from the day after. So if you did it on a Thursday, start counting from Friday. Friday, Saturday and Sunday don't count. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you can expect to hear Thursday or Friday. Hope that makes sense. Okay. Moving on then. Okay. Okay, Whitney, that's another new question that I haven't had before. So I'm going to put that one up. Just looking at time. Oh, wow. We're almost at the hour. I didn't think we'd make it through this long, but okay, amazing. So Whitney, you are saying that your recruiter asked you if you had any other job offers and you said yes, because it was true. Well done for telling the truth. Do they tell the panel you're worried it would impact how serious they think I am about the role? No, Whitney, honestly, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that, right? The working assumption, if you go to interview at Amazon, is that you want the job. Because why would you put yourself, why would you put yourself through the rigors of the Amazon interview process if you weren't serious about the job? So you can assume that everybody on the other side of that screen believes in their heart that you really want to work for Amazon. Now, your recruiter has asked you if you have any other roles happening because they want you to get the job and your recruiter believes in you or they wouldn't have put you forward in the first place. So part of that information will help drive the momentum behind getting your panel organized, because the last thing they want is for you to accept an offer with somebody else because Amazon, I almost said we then, because Amazon has taken so much time to get their act together and get your panel pulled together. What they will do is probably share that information with the hiring manager, because the recruiter keeps the hiring manager really well informed of what's going on. It's a real strong partnership. So again, they're going to want the hiring manager to know that you've got another job on the books potentially to help them drive some momentum. It's not just the recruiter's job to make sure that everybody accepts the invitation for the panel. The bar raiser is going to be hounding people to make sure they accept the invitation, and the hiring manager should also be hounding people because they've put you through, therefore they think you're likely to make it through. So it's absolutely fine. Tell them the truth, and no way whatsoever will it change anybody's perspective on you as a potential candidate. Only 2 people are probably going to know the answer that you share. They'll be the recruiter and the hiring manager. They won't share it with anybody else particularly. Okay, I hope that helped assuage some of your concern. All right, moving on then. Okay, there's one here I'm gonna potentially come back to. Let me just eyeball the rest. Okay, so Scott Cassoni. Welcome, Scott. Yours is a new name, I think, to me as well. So thank you very much for joining us today. I'm really pleased I decided to do this today, regardless of the kind of the Easter period. Got some amazing questions. I'm really delighted by this. Thank you, everybody, for asking such great questions. But is it bad to apply for multiple positions at Amazon at the same time? Will they hold it against you? Great question. So my perspective on this, and a perspective shared by almost all of the Amazon recruiters that I speak to and I'm connected to, and there are many, is that if you have a particular skill set, and let's say for now, program manager, you want to work for Amazon as a program manager, chances are program managers aren't going to be that bothered about what part of Amazon they work in, because their skill set is in program management. So whether it's at AWS or Amazon Fresh or Books or Prime Video, it's program management. And therefore, if they see that you've made multiple applications to different parts of the Amazon business, but all as program manager, fine. You want to be a program manager at Amazon. Why wouldn't you spread out the opportunity and try and improve your odds statistically? And they're absolutely fine with that. But If you have applied for a program manager role, a product manager role, a vendor manager role, a marketing manager role, a biz dev role, you see where I'm going with this. If you've applied for multiple different skill sets in Amazon at one time, at that point, the recruiters start looking at you and think, is this person just applying for anything they can think of in the hope that something will stick? Because if they are they really going to be the world's most passionate marketing manager if they're also applying for biz dev roles, product managers, etc., program managers, etc.? Probably not. And therefore, I'm less convinced that this person is going to raise the bar when it gets to Loop, when they're going to be really wanting to understand the key leadership principles for that role and feel that they're a fit for a role, if they think that they can pretty much apply and do any role across the board. So, Scott, there is no problem with you applying for multiple roles, but make sure that they are within the same job family. Don't start scattergunning across multiple different job families, because the recruiters are going to look at that and they're going to feel totally unconvinced that you are going to be passionate about the particular one of those big set of job families that you've thrown your resume into for. Cool. I hope that was helpful, Scott. Thank you for asking that question. We have 2 minutes left, people. So I am going to, I made the horrible mistake of not having pre-written this because I had tech problems. So let me just get my URL in here for you. This is the moment of pressure where people are looking over your shoulder when you're typing. Let me just check. Amazon interview with academy.teachable.com. Okay, so we have 1 minute left, and there is one final question that I just spotted, which I thought was quite good, which was, I can't find it now. Oh, there you go. Mayoresh. So you're asking if, can Amazon reject candidates if their writing assessment is not up to the mark, but the interview panel likes them? That's very unlikely. It's very unlikely. So if you are seen as raising the bar on all of the leadership principle questions that you were asked, if your writing sample comes in at below par, it's probably unlikely that you will get rejected, because writing is something everybody has to learn in Amazon. Even people who do the most fabulous writing samples still find themselves, when they come into Amazon, having to learn the Amazon way of writing. And it's actually really hard to articulate to you now why that's different from any other way of writing. So you'll just have to go on faith with me that it is. So writing strength is quite coachable if you are considered to be raising the bar on the other leadership principles. I tend to think of the writing sample as being, is it okay? Is it causing me, horror? If it's not causing me horror, then generally I'll be okay with someone being extended a higher offer if they're raising the bar on the other leadership principles. Where it will drag you down is if you're kind of on the borderline when it comes to the leadership principles. If your hiring manager and the bar raiser look at your writing sample and that's really disappointing, then that will be the nail in the coffin where they say, no, this person is not coming in. So I've approved hires on people whose writing samples have been what I would consider to be average. Clearly, you want to raise the bar on the writing sample if you possibly can. And I do have a video about it on my YouTube channel. So please do go and have a look at that. It's got really good tips on how to do a good writing sample. But an average writing sample isn't going to kill you if you raise the bar on the leadership principles. Okay, so we are now 1 minute over. So I'm just going to send you the link to the Amazon Interview Wiz Academy. There you will find a completely free customer obsession masterclass. It literally breaks down each of the facets of customer obsession, tells you what the interviewer is looking for, and shows you a mock interview of a split personality, me talking to myself. It was a very strange experience to record. Completely free, guys. I promise I will not be chasing you up with upsell emails. I decided I wouldn't do that. There's no reason why you shouldn't go and get it. So please do go grab yourself a customer obsession. If you love it, obviously I'd love you to invest in the rest of my program. But if you don't, I promise you will never hear from me again. Okay, I think we're done for today. Thank you. That was amazing. They were just the most brilliant questions. And I don't generally save these sessions onto YouTube because sometimes they get a little bit repetitive, but this was just jam-packed of super interesting questions. So I'm going to be posting this one and I think putting it on my YouTube channel permanently. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Thank you to Australia and getting up so early in the morning. I hope you had your coffee. Everybody else, you're fabulous. I really enjoyed this session. Thank you for your questions. Stay safe. If you have an interview coming up, I wish you the very, very best of luck. And hopefully I will see you all next week again. Please stay safe in this mad, crazy world. Take care. Bye-bye.